Billionaire CEO was buying an engagement cake, until his ex appeared with his biggest secret. You have a daughter, Julian. She's standing right in front of you. The words hung in the air of the luxury patisserie, slicing through Julian Cross's perfectly ordered world like a guillotine. His eyes, the exact same rare shade of grey-blue, stared back at him from the face of a 6-year-old girl he'd never known existed. Impossible, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the gentle classical music playing in the background. I would have known. Would you? Mara's voice was soft but pointed. You were always too busy building your empire to look back at what you left behind. The little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve. Mommy, does this man know Captain Waddles too? Welcome to Mr. Stevens Stories, where life's most profound lessons often come wrapped in unexpected packages. If you've ever wondered what happens when a carefully constructed life collides with hidden truths, stay with me. This story of a billionaire CEO forced to choose between the empire he built and the family he never knew will make you question everything you thought you knew about success. Please hit that subscribe button and join our community of story lovers. Your support helps this channel grow as we continue bringing you powerful narratives that change how we see the world. The pristine white walls of Lumiere Patisserie reflected Julian Cross's flawless image as he leaned over a sketch of his custom engagement cake. 7 tiers of perfection designed to make headlines when he proposed to Veronica Hale next weekend. The social media spectacle would cement not just their relationship but the merger between Cross Enterprises and Hale Industries, a power move worth billions. The finest champagne, 300 VIP guests, and now the perfect cake to immortalize the moment for their carefully curated social media narrative. The gold leaf should cascade from the 3rd tier, almost like liquid wealth, Julian instructed the master pâtissier, who nodded with practiced deference. And the monogram should be prominent but elegant. The photographers will want close-ups. Julian straightened the cuff of his tailored Brioni suit, checking his watch. A limited edition Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's homes. He had exactly 47 minutes before his next meeting, just enough time to finalize the cake design and make it back to Cross Tower, where his executive team awaited his decision on the Kurosawa acquisition. At 42, Julian had orchestrated his life with the same precision he applied to his business acquisitions. Everything calculated, every risk measured, every moment accounted for. Love, he believed, was no different, a strategic alliance with predictable returns. His engagement to Veronica made perfect sense. She was beautiful, intelligent, connected, and understood the rules of their arrangement. Companionship without messy emotions. Partnership without vulnerability. Success without distraction. Mr. Cross, would you prefer the Tahitian or Madagascar vanilla for the 4th tier? The pâtissier gestured to 2 small samples on delicate porcelain plates. Julian tasted each methodically. The Tahitian. It has more complexity. The bell above the patisserie door chimed softly. Julian paid no attention, focused entirely on the task at hand, until a child's laughter pierced his concentration, bright, uninhibited, achingly familiar in a way he couldn't immediately place. Can I have the duck on my cake, Mommy? Please. Something about that voice made Julian turn, and in that instant, the world collapsed around him. Mara Bennett stood at the counter, her chestnut hair shorter than he remembered, her smile lines deeper. It had been 7 years since he'd walked away, choosing a career opportunity in Singapore over their relationship. 7 years since he'd convinced himself that ambition demanded sacrifice. 7 years of deliberately not thinking about the one person who had ever made him question his relentless pursuit of success. But it wasn't Mara who froze his blood. It was the little girl beside her, no more than 6 years old, with unmistakable grey-blue eyes, his eyes, peering out from beneath untamed curls. The same eyes that had stared back at him from childhood photographs in his mother's albums. The same eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. Eyes so distinctive that strangers had commented on them throughout his life. We're picking up the birthday cake for Ivy Bennett, Mara told the clerk, unaware of Julian's presence just feet away. The one with the rainbow sprinkles. Ivy Bennett. The name echoed in Julian's mind as he calculated dates with terrifying clarity. 7 years since he'd left. 6-year-old child. The math was undeniable, and suddenly his perfect world began crumbling at the edges, like a blueprint exposed to flames. The clerk smiled at Ivy. Of course. The rainbow cake with extra sprinkles. Let me get that for you right away. When Mara finally noticed him, her smile vanished. Recognition, shock, and something like resignation crossed her face in rapid succession. She instinctively placed a protective hand on Ivy's shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes. "Julian," she said simply, her voice carrying neither anger nor joy, just quiet acknowledgement. The child, his daughter, looked up curiously. "Do you know this, sir, Mommy?" "Yes, sweetheart. From a long time ago." Julian's throat constricted as Ivy studied him with innocent curiosity, his own eyes reflecting back at him. The patisserie, with its delicate porcelain and precise measurements, suddenly felt suffocating. "You have a pretty tie," Ivy observed, pointing to his silk Hermes. "It's the same color as Captain Waddle's." "Captain Waddle's?" Julian managed, his voice barely audible, the name incongruous with the gravity of the moment. "My stuffed duck. He's my best friend when Mommy has to work late." Her small shoulders shrugged with a wisdom beyond her years. "Grown-ups always have to work, right? That's what Mommy says." Each word was a dagger. Julian had built towers of glass and steel while remaining oblivious to his own child's existence. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals and restructured entire industries, yet somehow missed the most significant creation of his life. "Mara," he finally said, finding his voice, "could we talk?" She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Ivy, why don't you ask the nice lady to show you the birthday cakes in the display? Maybe you can get some ideas for next year." When they were alone, Julian's carefully constructed poise crumbled. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mara's eyes hardened, the warmth he once knew replaced by a protective coolness. "I tried calling you after you left for Singapore. Your assistant said you were unreachable during negotiations. 2 weeks later, I saw the announcement of your engagement to Elise Chen splashed across the business section." Her voice remained measured, controlled. "I decided we'd be fine on our own. But that engagement ended months later. And then came the next one, and the next business venture." She cut him off without raising her voice. "Your life was exactly as you wanted it, Julian. Unfettered. Successful." She glanced at Ivy, who was delightedly examining a chocolate sculpture. "We've built a good life. She's happy." "She's my daughter," Julian whispered, the words foreign yet undeniable. "Biologically, yes." Mara straightened her shoulders. "Look, I didn't come here for this. We're celebrating her 6th birthday tomorrow. I'm not asking for anything." "Mara," Julian began, but was interrupted by a cool voice behind him. "Julian, darling, is everything all right? The cake designer needs your final approval on the flavor profile." Veronica Hale appeared at his elbow, immaculate in a tailored cream suit, her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon. Her eyes, calculating and shrewd, quickly assessed Mara and Ivy with the precision of someone accustomed to evaluating assets and liabilities. Her diamond bracelet caught the light as she placed a possessive hand on Julian's arm. "You seem distracted," she murmured, too quietly for others to hear. "Who are they?" In that moment, Julian felt his carefully ordered world fracture along invisible fault lines. "Veronica, I need a moment. There's something I need to discuss." Veronica's perfect smile remained fixed, but her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Of course. I'll wait in the private tasting room." As she walked away, Julian turned back to Mara. "I need to know her. Please." Mara studied him for a long moment. "What exactly are you asking for, Julian?" A play date before you jet off to your next acquisition. A photo for your wallet. She's not a business opportunity or a box to check. I know that. Julian ran a hand through his meticulously styled hair, disrupting its perfect arrangement. I'm asking for a chance. Just a chance to know my daughter. Mara glanced at Ivy, then back to Julian. We'll be at Harborline Green Park tomorrow at 3. Ivy feeds the ducks there after her birthday lunch. She picked up her purse. I'm not promising anything beyond that. Julian nodded, understanding the tenuous nature of the offer. Thank you. The conversation that followed in the pâtisserie's private tasting room with Veronica was brief and devastating. Julian explained with brutal honesty, watching as Veronica's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to cold calculation. A DNA test, she finally said, setting down her espresso cup with a precise click against the saucer. You'll need one before acknowledging anything publicly. The company's stock would plummet if this became a tabloid scandal. Her eyes narrowed. Julian, you've worked your entire life for the Skyline Haven project. The Kurosawa Consortium will pull their funding if there's even a hint of scandal. They're traditional to the point of being archaic. She has my eyes, Veronica. Everyone has someone's eyes. She stood, smoothing her skirt. I'm not saying she isn't yours. I'm saying we need to be strategic. If this child is indeed yours, we'll need to control the narrative. Proper paperwork, non-disclosure agreements, an appropriate trust fund to ensure discretion. She spoke of his daughter as if discussing a potential corporate liability. This isn't about public relations, Julian said, a strange new emotion rising in his chest. Everything is about public relations when you're worth $11 billion. Veronica's voice was precise, efficient. You have 48 hours to decide what you want, Julian. Certainty or chaos. I won't wait longer than that. Neither will the Kurosawa Consortium. If you're captivated by Julian's unexpected dilemma and want to discover how he navigates this life-changing revelation, take a moment right now to hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Stevens Stories. Your support helps us bring more powerful narratives that challenge our perspectives on what truly matters in life. Now, let's continue this journey as Julian's perfectly ordered world continues to unravel. That night, Julian sat in his penthouse overlooking the glittering city below. The engagement cake details had been finalized despite his distraction, but the taste of Tahitian vanilla now seemed irrelevant compared to the seismic shift in his reality. He pulled up an old photograph on his phone, one he'd never deleted despite his attempts to leave the past behind. Mara, 7 years younger, laughing as waves crashed around her knees on a secluded beach in Bali. They'd spent 2 weeks there, the longest vacation he'd ever allowed himself. It was the last truly carefree period of his life, before the Singapore opportunity had appeared like a siren's call. His phone buzzed with messages from his executive team regarding tomorrow's meeting, but for the first time in his career, Julian ignored them. Instead, he found himself searching for pediatric development milestones. What should a 6-year-old know? What did they like? What questions would they ask? By morning, Julian had made 2 decisions. First, he would meet Mara and Ivy at the park. Second, he would arrange for a discreet DNA test, not because he doubted, but because he knew the world he inhabited would demand proof. At precisely 3 o'clock the next day, Julian arrived at Harborline Green Park. He'd traded his usual suit for dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, an outfit chosen after considerable research on approachable father attire that had left his personal assistant bewildered. The park was modest by any standard, nothing like the manicured grounds of his country club or the exclusive resorts he frequented. Families picnicked on patchy grass, children queued for a simple ice cream cart, and elderly couples occupied worn wooden benches. Yet something about its unpretentious warmth made Julian pause, taking in the genuine laughter and relaxed postures absent from his usual environment. He spotted them near the small pond, Mara in a simple sundress, Ivy in a bright yellow birthday crown that caught the afternoon sunlight. His daughter clutched a paper bag, carefully tearing bread into tiny pieces for the waiting ducks. Julian approached slowly, suddenly unsure of himself in a way he hadn't experienced since his first investment pitch 20 years earlier. "You came," Mara said, noticing him first. Ivy looked up, recognition dawning on her face. "You're the man from the cake shop." "That's right." Julian knelt down to her level, a gesture that felt both foreign and instinctively right. "I'm Julian." "Happy birthday, Ivy." Ivy studied him with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. "How did you know it's my birthday?" "Your mom mentioned it yesterday." "I brought you something." Julian produced a small, carefully wrapped package from his pocket. He'd spent hours deliberating over the gift, rejecting his initial impulse to purchase something extravagant in favor of something more meaningful. Ivy accepted the package with ceremonial gravity, unwrapping it to reveal a small, handcrafted wooden duck. "It's like Captain Waddles," she exclaimed, eyes widening. "I thought they might be friends," Julian said, relief washing over him as Ivy beamed. "Captain Waddles needs a friend. He gets lonely when I'm at school." She examined the wooden duck from all angles. "I'll call him Lieutenant Quackers. He can be Captain Waddles' second-in-command." Julian found himself smiling, a real smile, not the practiced one he deployed at business functions. "That's a perfect name." Mara watched their interaction with guarded eyes, neither encouraging nor interfering. When Ivy returned to feeding the ducks, now introducing Lieutenant Quackers to his new duck friends, Mara moved slightly away, gesturing for Julian to join her. "She doesn't know who you are," she said quietly. "I need to be clear about that." "I understand." Julian watched his daughter, memorizing every detail, the way she scrunched her nose when concentrating, the careful deliberation she gave to dividing bread equally among the ducks. "When do you think we should tell her?" "That depends entirely on your intentions, Julian. Are you just satisfying your curiosity before returning to your real life? Because if that's the case, I'd rather she never knows." The question stung with its accuracy. "I want to be part of her life," he said, surprising himself with how true the words felt. "I just don't know what that looks like yet." "Neither do I," Mara admitted. "This isn't a situation I ever prepared for." Their conversation was interrupted by Ivy's excited call. "Look," she pointed to the sky. The clouds made a duck shape. "It's a sign that Lieutenant Quackers is welcome." Julian followed her gaze to the sunset he would normally have missed, preoccupied with quarterly projections and market expansions. Indeed, the clouds had formed what could reasonably be interpreted as a duck-like shape, painted in vibrant oranges and purples by the setting sun. "The sky has purple and orange and gold all mixed together," Ivy observed with delight. "It's beautiful," Julian agreed, seeing the sunset through his daughter's eyes, perhaps truly seeing one for the first time in decades. "This is my secret calm place," Ivy confided later, settling beside him on a park bench. "Mommy brings me here when things get too noisy." "Do things get noisy often?" Julian asked gently. Ivy nodded solemnly. "Sometimes at school. Sometimes in my head." She tapped her temple. "Mommy says it's because I feel things deeply, just like my daddy did." She spoke matter-of-factly, unaware of the impact of her words. Julian glanced at Mara, who had stepped away to purchase ice cream from the nearby cart. "Your daddy. Mommy says he had to go away for work before I was born. She has a picture of him. He has eyes like mine." Ivy studied Julian's face curiously. "Your eyes look like mine too." Julian's throat tightened. "Yes, they do. Is that why you came to my birthday? Because we have the same eyes?" Before Julian could formulate a response, his phone vibrated with Veronica's name on the screen, her ultimatum expiring. Simultaneously, an email arrived from his assistant marked urgent, Kurosawa Consortium threatening to withdraw. Requires immediate statement denying paternity rumors. PR team standing by. The rumors had already begun spreading. Of course they had, the walls of his world had eyes and ears everywhere. Someone at the patisserie must have recognized him, observed the encounter, drawn conclusions. Julian looked at Ivy, then at the message. For the first time in his life, a business crisis failed to trigger his immediate attention. With surprising clarity, he deleted the email and declined Veronica's call. "What are you doing?" Mara asked, returning with 3 ice cream cones. "Choosing," Julian said simply, accepting the offered dessert. "I choose her." 3 days later, Julian sat across from his legal team in Cross Tower's main conference room. The DNA test results sat in a sealed envelope before him, unnecessary confirmation of what his heart had already recognized from the first moment he saw Ivy's eyes. "Mr. Cross, before you open that, we need to discuss damage control strategies," began his chief counsel, a sharp-minded woman who had guided him through countless high-stakes negotiations. "There's nothing to control," Julian said, opening the envelope without ceremony. He scanned the results, then passed them to his lawyer. "I have a daughter." "That's not damage. That's a fact. The Kurosawa Consortium has already issued a preliminary statement expressing concern about your personal situation. The Hales are reconsidering the terms of the merger. Your board is requesting an emergency meeting." His chief operating officer listed the cascading consequences dispassionately. "Schedule the board meeting for tomorrow morning," Julian said, standing up. "And draw up papers for a trust fund for Ivy. I want it ironclad, generous without being excessive, structured for education and well-being, not to create dependency." "And the Kurosawa statement?" "They're expecting a denial and reassurance." Julian straightened his tie. "Tell them I'm handling my personal affairs with the same integrity I bring to business. If that's insufficient, they're welcome to withdraw." Julian, his CFO interjected, using his first name, a rarity in their professional relationship. "The Skyline Haven project needs their backing. Without it, we're looking at a potential 20% drop in shareholder value. Then we'll find alternative financing or scale back the project." Julian moved toward the door, then turned back. "For years, I've told you all that contingency planning is the backbone of business success. If our company can't withstand one change in funding, then I've failed to build something resilient. If you're moved by Julian's journey from calculating businessman to father, show your support by hitting that like button and subscribe to Mr. Stevens Stories. Your engagement helps us continue creating meaningful narratives that explore the profound moments that change our lives forever. Now, let's see how Julian navigates the challenges of becoming the father he never planned to be. Over the next 2 weeks, Julian's personal and professional worlds underwent seismic shifts. The Kurosawa Consortium, true to their word, withdrew their backing from the Skyline Haven project. Veronica returned her engagement ring via courier, along with a tersely worded note about incompatible priorities. The business press, which had long celebrated Julian's Midas touch, now speculated about his distraction and personal crisis. None of it mattered compared to the tentative relationship forming between Julian and his daughter. After careful discussions with Mara, they had agreed to introduce him to Ivy as her father. A conversation that Julian had approached with more trepidation than any business negotiation. "Ivy," Mara had said, sitting beside their daughter on the living room couch of their modest apartment. "Remember how I've told you that your daddy had to go away before you were born?" Ivy nodded, clutching Captain Waddles and Lieutenant Quackers to her chest. "Because of work." "That's right. Well, sometimes people get very lost in their work and forget about the most important things." Mara glanced at Julian, who sat across from them, his usual confidence replaced by nervous anticipation. "Julian is your daddy. He didn't know about you until we saw him at the cake shop." Ivy's eyes, so like Julian's, widened as she processed this information, looking back and forth between the adults. "But why didn't you come find us before?" she asked Julian directly, her child's perspective cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Julian had prepared for this question, rehearsing answers that ranged from simplified half-truths to complex explanations. In the moment, however, only honesty felt right. "I made a mistake," he said simply. "A very big mistake. I thought work was the most important thing in the world, and I was wrong. If I had known about you, I hope I would have made better choices. But now that I do know about you, I would very much like to be your dad, if you'll let me." Ivy considered this with surprising thoughtfulness for a 6-year-old. "Do you know how to play Go Fish?" "Mommy says my daddy would have been good at card games because he was smart with numbers." "I do know how to play Go Fish," Julian replied, hope rising in his chest. "And I'd be honored to play with you." "Okay." Ivy nodded, as if settling an important business matter. "We can start with that." That simple card game became their gateway. A neutral ground where father and daughter began building a relationship. One, "Do you have any threes?" at a time. Julian rearranged his entire schedule around their Tuesday and Thursday evenings together and Sunday afternoons at the park. For the first time in his adult life, Julian declined business trips, delegated critical meetings, and left his office before sunset. His executive team watched in bewilderment as the man who had once responded to emails at 3 a.m. now had unavailable blocks on his calendar labeled simply Ivy time. One Tuesday evening, a month after their first park meeting, Julian arrived at Mara's apartment to find Ivy waiting with a backpack shaped like a duck. "Where are we going?" he asked, confused by the deviation from their usual card games and puzzles. "To your house," Ivy announced. "Mommy says I can see where you live if that's okay with you. I want to know if you have ducks there too." Julian glanced at Mara, who nodded. "We talked about it this morning. I thought it might be good for her to see that part of your life too. Unless it's not convenient." "It's perfect," Julian assured them both, though internally he panicked at the thought of his minimalist penthouse with its museum-quality art and absence of anything child-friendly. Absolutely perfect. On the drive over, he frantically texted his housekeeper to remove anything breakable from the lower shelves and to order in child-appropriate food. "What do 6-year-olds eat for dinner?" he asked in a follow-up message that left his longtime staff member equally bewildered. When they arrived at his building, Ivy was suitably impressed by the doorman who tipped his hat to her, like a princess movie, and the private elevator with its biometric security. "Is this a spaceship?" Her reaction to his penthouse, however, was not what Julian expected. "Where are all your things?" she asked, looking around the expansive, sparsely furnished living area with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "What do you mean?" Julian asked, seeing his home through new eyes. "Your drawings and books and toys," Ivy clarified, examining the minimalist furnishings with confusion. "Where do you play?" The innocent question struck Julian with unexpected force. His home, which architectural magazines had featured as the epitome of sophisticated urban living, suddenly seemed sterile and empty, a showcase rather than a home. "I don't really play much," he admitted. "I mostly work." Ivy frowned, processing this sad state of affairs. "Everyone needs to play," she declared with the certainty only a child could muster. "Captain Waddles says that's how you keep your heart happy." "Captain Waddles is very wise," Julian said, smiling despite the unexpected lump in his throat. "Perhaps you could teach me how to play again." That evening transformed Julian's understanding of his own space. They built a fort using his imported Italian sheets and the minimalist furniture. They ate pizza on the floor inside their creation, breaking his usual rule about food in the living room. They played shadow puppets against the wall using the city lights as backdrop. When it was time for Mara to pick up Ivy, his daughter hugged him goodbye, the first time she had initiated physical affection. "Next time, can we have a sleepover?" she asked. "I could bring Captain Waddles and Lieutenant Quackers. They've never been to a penthouse before." "I would like that very much," Julian said, surprising himself with how deeply he meant it. After they left, Julian stood in his empty penthouse, now restored to its pristine condition but somehow forever changed in his perception. The silence, once welcome after long days of meetings and decisions, now felt hollow. On impulse, he left the fort they had built standing in the corner of his living room, a bright, chaotic monument to play in his otherwise ordered space. The next morning, Julian arrived at Cross Tower earlier than usual. He had made a decision during the sleepless night, and now he needed to set it in motion. He called his executive team together for an unscheduled meeting. "I'm restructuring my role within the company," he announced without preamble. "Effective immediately, I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations to focus on strategic direction. Elaine will be promoted to COO with expanded authority." He nodded toward his most trusted executive, who looked stunned but pleased. "May I ask what prompted this decision?" his CFO inquired carefully. Julian considered the question. 6 weeks ago, he would have prepared a detailed presentation outlining the business rationale, complete with projections and contingencies. Today, he simply told the truth. "I have a 6-year-old daughter who believes everyone needs to play to keep their heart happy. I've recently discovered she's right." The silence that followed was broken only when Elaine spoke up. "Congratulations, Julian. On both the daughter and the wisdom to recognize what matters." As Julian had predicted, the business press had a field day with his restructuring announcement, especially coming so soon after the Kurosawa withdrawal and his broken engagement. Speculation ran rampant. Was Julian Cross having a midlife crisis? Was he being forced out by the board? Was there a health issue being concealed from shareholders? The truth, that he was simply choosing to be present for his daughter, seemed too mundane for the financial analysts who had long portrayed him as a business titan driven solely by ambition and strategy. Are you enjoying Julian's transformation from calculating CEO to devoted father? If this story is touching your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Mr. Steven's Stories. Your support means everything to us as we continue sharing powerful narratives about life's most important lessons. Now, let's see how Julian's new priorities transform not just his relationship with Ivy, but with Mara as well. Meanwhile, Julian's relationship with Mara was evolving in unexpected ways. Their initial wary cooperation had gradually shifted to something more complex as they navigated co-parenting. Julian found himself admiring how Mara had built a life for herself and Ivy. Working as a graphic designer, creating a warm home, and raising their daughter with values that transcended material wealth. "You've done an incredible job with her," Julian told Mara one evening as they watched Ivy playing at a local community center event. "She's kind, resilient, creative, everything a parent could hope for." "We managed," Mara said simply. "It wasn't always easy, but we had each other." "I should have been there," Julian said, the regret that had become his constant companion surfacing again. Mara was quiet for a moment. "For a long time, I was angry about that. But Ivy has been my greatest joy, and I can't regret the path that brought her to me, even if parts of the journey were painful." Their conversation was interrupted by Ivy's excited call for them to join her in a group game. As Julian found himself holding hands in a circle with parents and children, participating in a simple singing game he'd never heard before, he caught Mara watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, surprise mixed with something softer. Later, walking back to Mara's apartment together, Ivy skipping ahead with another child she'd befriended, Mara broke their comfortable silence. "You've changed," she observed. "I'm trying to," Julian acknowledged. "Being Ivy's father is teaching me more than 20 years in business ever did." "What's the most important lesson so far?" Mara asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Julian considered the question carefully. "That success isn't what you build," he finally said. "It's who you show up for." Mara's steps faltered slightly, and when Julian looked at her, he was surprised to see tears in her eyes. "That's exactly what my father used to say," she whispered. "I never told you that." The coincidence, or perhaps the shared value that had drawn them together years ago, hung between them, creating a moment of connection that transcended their complicated past. 2 months after discovering Ivy's existence, Julian faced a crucial board meeting. The Skyline Haven project had been redesigned at a smaller scale with alternative investors, but stock prices remained volatile. Shareholders were questioning Julian's new priorities and limited availability. "I won't lie to you," Julian told the assembled board members, standing confidently at the head of the table. "My priorities have changed. I believe cross-enterprises can thrive while being led by a CEO who values work-life balance. In fact, I believe it will become a competitive advantage in attracting top talent who share those values." "And if the shareholders disagree," challenged one of the more traditional board members. "Then I'm prepared to step down completely," Julian replied calmly. "I've built something I'm proud of, but I've discovered there are more important legacies than corporate ones." The statement sent ripples through the business community, but it also resonated with a surprising segment of the public. Julian began receiving letters and emails from parents, particularly fathers, who found his candor about choosing family over unlimited corporate ambition refreshing and validating. One Sunday afternoon, 2.5 months after their patisserie encounter, Julian and Mara sat on a park bench watching Ivy feed the ducks with her ever-present Captain Waddles and Lieutenant Quackers. "I received an offer to exhibit my design work in New York," Mara said without preamble. "It's a significant opportunity, the kind that could take my freelance career to the next level." "That's wonderful," Julian said sincerely. "When would it be?" "Next month." "It would mean being away for 2 weeks." Mara hesitated. "I've never been away from Ivy for more than a day since she was born." Julian understood immediately what she was asking. "I could stay with her," he offered. "At your place, to keep her routine as normal as possible." "You'd do that? Put your work on hold for 2 weeks to be a full-time dad?" In a heartbeat, Julian said, surprised by how easy the decision was. "If you trust me enough." Mara studied him, then nodded slowly. "I do trust you. That's what surprises me most about all of this, how quickly you've become someone Ivy can count on." "Someone I can count on. I'll never disappear again," Julian promised. "From either of your lives." The 2 weeks of full-time parenting proved to be the most challenging and rewarding of Julian's life. He learned to braid hair, poorly at first, then with increasing skill after YouTube tutorials. He mastered the school drop-off protocol, navigated playground politics, and discovered the sacred importance of bedtime routines. Most importantly, he experienced the day-to-day reality of being present, really present, in his daughter's life. The mundane moments became precious, helping with kindergarten homework, discussing the social dynamics of Ivy's classroom, celebrating when she conquered a difficult puzzle. Each evening, Ivy insisted on video calling Mara to share their day's adventures, and Julian found himself looking forward to these calls as much as his daughter did. Seeing Mara's face, animated as she described the response to her exhibition, stirred feelings he'd long since buried. On Mara's final night in New York, after Ivy had gone to bed, Julian admitted something he'd been reflecting on throughout the 2 weeks. "I understand now what I walked away from," he said quietly. "Not just Ivy, but the chance to build a real life with you. One with meaning beyond acquisitions and expansions." Mara was silent for a long moment. "We were very young," she finally said. "And you had different priorities then." "I had the wrong priorities," Julian corrected. "I chased what I thought was success and missed what actually mattered." When Mara returned, Julian helped Ivy prepare a welcome home celebration, complete with homemade decorations and a cake they had baked together. Lopsided but made with love. As Ivy proudly showed Mara the slightly burned edges and excessive sprinkles, Julian found himself watching them both with a fullness in his heart he'd never experienced in all his years of business triumphs. Later that evening, after Ivy had fallen asleep surrounded by her stuffed duck collection, which had somehow expanded during Mara's absence, Julian prepared to return to his penthouse. He'd grown accustomed to the cozy apartment with its evidence of life everywhere, artwork on the refrigerator, books stacked on end tables, toy ducks in unexpected places. "Thank you," Mara said, walking him to the door. "For everything." She looked so happy. "Thank you for trusting me with her." Julian paused at the threshold. "And for finding me at that patisserie, even if it was accidental." "Maybe it wasn't entirely accidental," Mara admitted softly. "I'd seen an article about your engagement. I knew you frequented that patisserie. Part of me thought Ivy deserved to at least see her father once, even if from a distance. I never intended to speak to you." The revelation stunned Julian. "You mean?" "I mean fate took over where my courage might have faltered." Mara met his eyes directly. "I'm glad it did." If Julian's journey has touched your heart, please take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to Mr. Stephen's Stories. Your engagement helps us bring more powerful narratives about family, second chances, and what truly matters in life. Now, let's see how this story concludes as Julian makes his most important decision yet. 2 months later, Julian sat in a very different patisserie, a small, family-owned bakery in Mara's neighborhood. Across from him, Ivy carefully considered the display case of cupcakes with the seriousness of someone making a life-altering decision. "I think the chocolate one with rainbow sprinkles," she finally declared. "And Mommy would like the lemon one." Julian smiled at her thoughtfulness. "Excellent choices." As the baker boxed their selections, Julian felt the small velvet box in his jacket pocket. Not an ostentatious diamond like the one he'd purchased for Veronica, but a simple emerald that matched Mara's eyes, set in a band engraved with tiny waves, a reminder of that beach in Bali where they'd once been truly happy. He had no illusions about what he was proposing. This wouldn't be a fairy tale reconciliation or a business merger. It would be a second chance built on hard-earned wisdom, shared love for their daughter, and the tentative new connection that had been growing between them over months of co-parenting. Mara might say no, and Julian would respect that. He'd continue being Ivy's father regardless. But these months had shown him that his feelings for Mara had never truly disappeared, they'd just been buried under ambition and regret. "Penny for your thoughts," came Mara's voice as she joined them, having finished her design meeting nearby. "You look very serious for someone buying cupcakes." "I was just thinking about choices," Julian said, standing to greet her. "And how sometimes we get second chances to make better ones." Mara's expression softened. "Those are heavy thoughts for a Tuesday afternoon." "Tuesday afternoons can be profound," Julian replied with a smile, watching as Ivy proudly presented her mother with the carefully selected lemon cupcake. Later that week, Julian stood on the steps of the county courthouse, watching as Ivy scattered flower petals along the path. The small, private ceremony bore no resemblance to the media spectacle he'd once planned with Veronica. There were no photographers, no VIP guests, no carefully orchestrated social media moments. Just a handful of people who truly mattered. Mara waited at the end of the makeshift aisle, beautiful in a simple white dress, her eyes cautious but hopeful. She had said yes to his proposal, not with the immediate certainty of romance novels, but with thoughtful consideration of what it would mean for all their lives. "I want us to try," she had said. "Not to recapture what we had, but to build something new and better, with both eyes open this time." The headlines about Julian Cross stepping back from daily operations at his company had faded. The collapse of the merger with Hale Industries was old news. The business world had adjusted to his new approach to leadership, and surprisingly, Cross Enterprises was thriving under the more balanced model he'd implemented. What remained was the chance to build something he'd never considered valuable until now, a life measured not in acquisitions but in moments. Not in control but in connection. As Ivy bounded back to take his hand, clutching Captain Waddles in her other arm, Julian understood the truth that had eluded him for 42 years, success wasn't what you built. It was who you showed up for. The simple courthouse wedding concluded with quiet vows, promises not of perfection but of presence, not of flawlessness but of forgiveness. As they signed the marriage certificate, Julian found himself thinking of that day in the patisserie when his perfectly ordered world had shattered. That breaking had been the most fortunate collapse of his life, creating space for something authentic to grow in its place. 6 months later, Julian sat on the floor of their new home, a compromise between his minimalist penthouse and Mara's cozy apartment. Toys were scattered across the living room, evidence of Ivy's exuberant play. The walls displayed a mixture of fine art and childish drawings, coexisting in delightful contradiction. "Daddy, watch this," Ivy called, attempting a somersault that ended in a jumbled heap of giggles. Captain Waddles and Lieutenant Quackers tumbled alongside her. Very impressive, Julian applauded, his heart still skipping whenever she called him Daddy, a title worth more than any corporate position he'd ever held. Mara joined them on the floor, leaning comfortably against Julian's shoulder. "What do you think?" she asked quietly. "Was it worth giving up the empire?" Julian looked around at their imperfect, joy-filled home and the small family he'd nearly missed having. "I didn't give up an empire," he corrected gently. "I found one that actually matters." Outside, the sun set over the city skyline, painting the clouds in purple and orange and gold all mixed together. Julian watched it not through a corporate tower's window but from the floor of a living room scattered with toys, his daughter's laughter the sweetest sound he'd ever known. The engagement cake he'd been designing when his life changed had never been completed. Instead, Julian had discovered that the most meaningful celebrations weren't elaborately staged events designed to impress others, but quiet moments of authentic connection with those who mattered most. In the end, the billionaire CEO who once measured success in assets and acquisitions learned the truth that had eluded him throughout his meteoric rise: real wealth wasn't counted in dollars or deals. It was measured in bedtime stories and duck-feeding expeditions, in crayon drawings proudly displayed on refrigerators, and in the sound of his daughter's voice calling him home. Thank you for joining us for this story about rediscovering what truly matters in life. If Julian's journey resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Mr. Steven's Stories. Your support helps us continue sharing powerful narratives that remind us all of life's most important lessons. Until next time, remember that success isn't what you build, it's who you show up for.